It is time for Political Breakfast. This morning, we're going to talk about Georgia Governor Brian Kemp. Once again, he is drawing ire from Republican presidential nominee and former President Donald Trump. Republican strategist Brian Robinson is here this morning. So is Saba from the Atlanta Civic Circle, who is in for Theron Johnson. Good morning for both of you.
Good morning, Lisa. Good morning, Saba.
Good morning.
Well, a lot has transpired since we last spoke last week. Today we're talking about Governor Kemp. And here you have a governor who put distance between himself and Trump politics, but said he would support the Republican ticket. And then he's the target of Trump, who took jabs at him and his wife at the rally over the weekend. So, Brian, as you know, this is not sitting well with some Georgia Republicans. What are you hearing?
Well, shock and confusion is part of it, because it's not a good strategy to focus on someone who is not your opponent. He's on the ballot with Kamala Harris. And we are in a critical period where defining her is hugely important. She has been vice president, but she's still an unpainted canvas, and she is actively trying to paint the canvas. Her campaign is right now, and the Republicans have to be doing it at the same time. She can't be seen as some law and order former prosecutor. That can't be the branding that Republicans allow her to have. So Brian Kemp is a distraction in this discussion. And a lot of Republican leaders in this state who do want change in Washington very, very badly were lined up to be supportive of the campaign, to post photos from the rally, to talk about the need for getting Trump back in the White House. And a lot of them had to stay silent because they didn't want to get brought into this inter-family squabble. Mm-hmm. So it quieted a lot of support in the long run. Brian Kemp was very disciplined when Trump was attacking him during Kemp's election cycle. He never responded. This cycle, Trump was responding to Kemp saying he cast an empty ballot in the primary, and the First Lady saying that she was going to write in Governor Kemp's name as opposed to Trump on her ballot. So he should learn from them, ignore the attacks, focus on the election, focus on the issues, cost of living, and the crisis at the border, areas where Republicans have a strong lead in polling with voters.
Yeah, Saba, let's get you in here. It is a critical juncture in this race for the White House. Would you go as far as to say that his rhetoric over the weekend was political suicide, specifically here in Georgia?
No, I wouldn't say that, but I would say if he keeps this up, it's going to be death by 1,000 cuts. You know, what's interesting, and I was talking to some Democrats over the weekend, I think it's fair to say that Trump has attacked Kemp more than the Georgia Democratic Party has attacked Kemp, and that really says something. Also over the weekend, the Wall Street Journal editorial board wrote specifically about Trump's remarks towards Kemp and Marty Kemp, and said the former president is not doing himself any favors. And so if you are not a Trump acolyte, if you're someone who like maybe I'd say Marty Kemp wants a Republican in office but doesn't like this tactic, what do you do on Election Day?
Yeah, our political reporter, Raul Bali, reported this morning that there are those within the GOP that support both. Is that possible, Brian?
They have supported both throughout, and we saw that in 2022. Brian Kemp doesn't get to 75% in the GOP primary then without capturing the vast majority of Trump voters, those who would consider themselves to be part of the MAGA base. So this isn't something new. And that's part of the confusion. People aren't going to pick sides here. Trump made his opinions clear in 2022. They didn't want Kemp reelected. And most Republicans in Georgia had a history of doing what he wanted. They were going to go the direction that he pointed. And then they didn't in that case. They stuck with Brian Kemp because they knew what they knew. And voters know their governor. It's an almost intimate relationship. They're in your face a lot. They are directly impactful in the rules and regulations of your life. And we associate state government with them. We know what we think of them and aren't going to be told by someone else, even someone we trust, to believe something that's not our lived experience. So I also want to point out that when it comes to the rhetoric, it wasn't just the Kemp stuff. I think the Kemp stuff is important to people who are insiders it may be people who pay a lot of attention to politics, but for others, one buddy of mine that I've known for 40 years said he called my city a killing field. And that was her takeaway from it. She doesn't care about attacks on Kemp. She's not a political person. It's not what she lives and breathes every day. But she felt like, why is he talking about the city where I raised my kids like that? And I don't want, we shouldn't lose sight that that's part of how the general public consumed this as well.
Yeah, and Saba, how could this hurt or hinder Trump's chances of winning Georgia? It seems people are growing tired of this type of rhetoric.
I think it's like what we've talked about over the past couple of weeks. The question is, do folks sit on the sidelines? Do they say, I'm not going to vote at the top of the ticket, but I will vote down ballot for Republicans across the state? And that might very well happen. We saw this with Herschel Walker. I mean, this is something, again, that the Wall Street Journal editorial pointed out, that 2 Senate seats Democrats won in part because of Republican mistakes like Trump's mistakes. And so we'll see what happens. Another just anecdote, a Georgia conservative talk show host yesterday talked about how on his show, a number of Republican women called and said, I'm upset with what Trump said. I'm upset with his attacks on Marty Kemp. This is not okay. And we know Trump does not back down. He does not apologize. So the question is, does he pull back or does he double down?
It sounds like he has something to salvage here. And if so, Brian, how does he go about it?
Trump has been through one storm after another over these past 9 years, and he always tends to come out standing on both feet. And he can quickly pivot back to the message at hand. And that is not Brian Kemp. It is Kamala Harris. It is cost of living. It is immigration. We had a stock market semi-crash on Monday with fears of a recession. That'll give him an angle to talk about how good your life was pre-COVID when he was president. Red hot economy. Voters trust Republicans and Trump on the economy. It's a great pivot point. He needs to stick to those issues. And that is a winning formula. If he does that, this will be instantly forgotten or quickly forgotten. And he can get back to a pathway, a strategy that can win. He, before Saturday, was still favored to win this election. And I think that the margins in Georgia have tightened some. Kamala's had a good few weeks. Democrats here are obviously energized. There's no doubt about it. But he can still be in the pole position with a few strategic tweaks and staying on message.
Saba, is that your feeling as well?
That's my feeling, but it's not necessarily on brand for Trump. He's not known to stay on message. He's not known for message discipline at all. And so the question is, over the next, however many 80 days or so, what happens? Democrats are united. We've talked about that. And again, this is another example where you see some fracturing happening, at least in Georgia Republican politics. And it's going to be a very interesting ride over the next couple of months.
Saba Long, Executive Director of the Atlanta Civic Circle, Republican strategist Brian Robinson. As always, thank you so much for your perspective this morning.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks.
Amplifying Atlanta, this is listener-funded WABE 90.1.